of not a perfect definition for when someone is beholden or could be perceived to be beholden. And we would argue that we should err on the side of inclusion versus exclusion, particularly when the application process contemplates that there will be other opportunities for applicants with a conflict of interest to be removed from the applicant pool. So, for example, when the applicant pool is judging, or when the applicant review panel is judging whether an applicant has the ability to be impartial, that is an opportunity for someone with a clear conflict of interest who doesn't fall within the appointed to office definition to be taken out. Additionally, the application process that the state auditor has, that the state auditor is contemplating, allows members of the public to comment on applicants. So if it's clear that an applicant wasn't excluded by the appointed to office definition but still has a conflict of interest, members of the public can comment on that. And then lastly, the 4 legislative leaders have the ability to strike people who are clear political ringers.
Okay, I have an additional question. You're suggesting that we place greater emphasis on the Voting Rights Act in the regulations. But before I ask the question, I want to let you know that we had already made an internal decision that we're going to be providing some pretty intensive training to the applicant review panel members, and included in that would be the Voting Rights Act. But getting back to my question, and you might not be the right person to ask it, but why isn't this part of the consensus group's recommendation?
Oh, sure. It's a good question. I think that my colleagues all agree that we've put a lot of time in discussing various points that are in the working group letter, and there are a lot of points, 25 points. Part of it was just an issue of time. There are actually other points that are not listed in the working group letter that the working group had identified as issues they wanted to discuss, but we just didn't have time to get to them, and there was no time to get to these issues identified in the letter submitted by APOL, Waldorf, and the NALEO Educational Fund. And then another reason was that some of the issues that are presented in this 3-group letter were actually issues that came to us recently within the past week, and so there wasn't time to bring it up within the larger working group. So that's really the only reason, and I'm going to leave it to my colleagues to chime in on whether they agree or disagree with them.
I'm just trying to get a sense of whether your recommendations are controversial in any sense, or if there's any sort of disagreement out there with that recommendation.
Sure. I would like to say that our recommendations are consistent with the intent of the working group, but as I mentioned, because of time reasons, we didn't have a chance to discuss them within the larger working group. The only exception would be our recommendation for the definition of appointed to state or federal office. As I mentioned, our working group has diverse perspectives on that point. But the other recommendations, I would like to say, are consistent with the intent of what the working group wanted to do.
Okay. Do the panel members have any more questions for Eugene? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Rosalind Gold. I'm Senior Director of Policy, Research, and Advocacy for the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. That's NALEO Educational Fund. And I very much want to thank this panel for the opportunity to testify this morning. Our mission at the NALEO Educational Fund is to empower Latinos to participate fully in the American political process, from citizenship to public service. So the issue of redistricting and the issue of how this commission, the application process, how commissioners are selected, very much go to the core of the mission. I want to echo the sentiments of many of the people who have come up in thanking you all for the thought and the care that you put into coming up with these regulations. We think the proposal is very much a great step in the right direction of creating a transparent, efficient, and accessible application process, one that ensures that you'll have qualified folks on the commission, and one that enhances the opportunity to make sure that commission is diverse. And we were one of the signatories to the working group letter because we believe the comments in the working group letter will help us bring us even closer to that goal. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start off with comments with respect to the working group letter. And first of all, I wanted to talk about the Phase 1 and Phase 2 application periods. We would just urge the BSA to post very clearly what are the timelines for both of those application periods, make it known to the public, put it on the website. We think the clearer, the more information that applicants have about what exactly the timeline is, the better they'll be able to prepare. You know, with respect to the Phase 2 application, folks are going to need to get information about their employment history, about what they want to put in their essays. They're going to have to arrange for people to send in recommendation letters. The more notice folks have about what the timing is, the better prepared they are, the better applications you're going to get, the more complete applications you're going to get. And when you establish those timelines, to the extent possible, and we do understand some of the constraints that face you, if you can stick with them, that would be great. And also just do some thinking about whether the time that you've allotted for the phases, and in particular Phase 2, is sufficient for applicants to gather that information. The second comment I wanted to make goes to the amount of notice that is given to people who make it to the interview process. The regulations currently contemplate 5 days. We would urge you to extend that to 7 days. People who get that notice of being interviewed are going to, if they're employed outside the home, going to need to make arrangements to take time off, maybe find a replacement. If they have family commitments or family obligations, are going to need to make arrangements for someone to take care of those. We hope that you can, just give folks a bit more notice so that they can make the arrangements to come up to Sacramento to be interviewed. We do commend you for specifically indicating that you will reimburse the costs of people who are brought up to interview. We think that'll go very far towards helping to eliminate economic barriers to service on the commission. We were also signatories to the letter that the Asian Pacific American Legal Center and the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund signed, and I want to now talk about the issues and in my role as a signatory to that 3-organization letter. And the first issue that I wanted to bring up is with respect to the provisions that create a conflict of interest if you have made contributions to a local candidate and those contributions are in excess of $2,000 for any of one of the last 10 years. We would urge you to actually create an exemption or create a clarification that if you have self-financed your campaign as a local candidate, that does not constitute a contribution for the purpose of the conflict of interest regulations. And here's why. We do not believe that the drafters intended to completely eliminate local office holders like school board members or city council members from serving on the commission. If the intention was to disqualify those people, it would have been done so in the provision that disqualifies candidates for state or federal office. So if you consider contributions that people make to their own local campaigns as a contribution that would trigger the conflict of interest regulations, you end up with a very sort of anomalous situation where a candidate for a school board, city council, county office who accepted all of their contributions from outside sources, outside donors, and arguably be more beholden to special interests, would not run afoul of the contributions limit where somebody who had financed by using their own resources, mortgaging their home, would be running afoul if the amounts were